All right. Well, I see our faces on OBS, so that's a good thing. And now I see it in the Twitch side. So good evening, Luca. Thank you for
Hello.
hanging around with me on a Monday evening for you, a Monday afternoon for me. Why don't you introduce yourself to our viewers slash watchers in the future, and then we will see where the muse takes us today.
Okay, no problem. So thank you very much for having me. My name is Luca. I'm a principal solution architect in AWS. I joined AWS very recently in January. Before I was working as vice president of architecture in a company called DAZN. It's a live OTT platform. So basically, imagine Netflix, but for sports with live event. That was what we were doing, and there I had like an incredible 6 years where I was able to let's say travel a lot all over the world. It was very funny, and we launched in a few countries. First country was Japan, then Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, and then before I left, I was able to take part of the project that take the zone all over the world. So now it's available in 220 countries. It was an incredible ride. And it's 18 years that I'm working in this industry. I published one book, another book on his way. I did over 150 talks in my career, workshop, webinars, training. I'm quite passionate about sharing what I'm learning because I truly believe in community. Also because my history, basically, I learn a lot from them. I have this depth, constant depth with the community, and if I can smooth the journey for someone, I'm at least I'm trying to do that for everyone because I think it's very very important. It's useful for me, it's useful for other people. So that's me basically in a nutshell.
That's a fantastic point. One of my grad students this semester is doing an independent study where she's learning mobile development. She's playing around with iOS. And one of the things I encouraged her to do at the beginning of the semester was keep track of the tutorials you went through, the workshops you went through, and what you learned, where the gaps were, and then basically blog it, because I said this will benefit you in the future. And you never know who's going to run into that, because she found all sorts of weird, oh, this didn't quite work right and I had to do this. And I said, good, write that down and put that back out in the community, because someone will be coming behind you and run into that same problem, and they will find your blog post and be like, oh, thank you for solving this, Katie. I appreciate that. And now you help kind of, close that loop. And I think that's an important part, is we all learn from somebody else. And so feeding that back into the system is a huge win.
Totally.
Now you are based in one of my favorite places that I sadly have not been to now in more than a year thanks to the pandemic. How are things in the UK?
So far, so good. I would say in the last few months, let's say the government push hard on having many people vaccinated. Currently, all the people that are over 45 years old, they have at least one shot. Now they started last week with the 40s onwards. Therefore, it's going pretty well. There are quite few people, elder people, that currently have two shots. So we are in a very decent position right now. Things are reopening. We were in lockdown since early December, and mid-April, they started to ease a bit the things. And currently, we can, for instance, go to the restaurants, but if they have outside tables, not inside. We School are open again, so things are getting there. In a couple of weeks' time, we will have another checkpoint, and possibly we will be able to take flights internationally, because at the moment you cannot for holidays or anything, just for work or for strong
Sure.
reasons. And yeah, so I would say that is getting there. It will take, I would say, other 3-4 months before we are going to the new normal. But it's better than before, definitely.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. The U.S. State Department, this was I think last week, the week before, put about 80% of the world on the do not travel list, level 4 or whatever they call it. And as someone who has traveled quite a bit in the last decade-ish, it's a little bit of a head scratcher, because I'm thinking, in theory, by the fall, maybe everything will be okay. And I have pitched for a couple of events in London, and I'm hopeful that that gets to happen. I have my all-time favorite restaurant that I haven't been to now in more than a year, and I'm so disappointed. But then I think, wait a minute, am I even going to be able to get in? But then you think, well, a lot can change in a month or two or three. So, fingers crossed that some amount of normalcy will return in our near future. But, although as we were talking in the pre-show, I have no idea what normal is going to look like. And what
That's a
what
good
what do you what
question.
do you see happening? What do you think 2022 looks like from your vantage point?
I can tell you a bit about London, or at least what I'm thinking about London currently. Obviously we had also the Brexit,
Yeah.
that is another big deal here in UK, and many companies moved back in the mainland, how they call that, or Europe basically, and a lot of financial corporates are moving back to Europe. So in UK currently, vast majority of the companies that currently are based in London are tech companies, obviously. But apparently, I don't think, because many large organizations are investing heavily in London, but and in UK, but in reality, with this pandemic, I think they accelerate the fact that many people will work from home.
Yeah.
And therefore, I don't expect to in next year to have 5 days per week in the office. I'm expecting more flexibility. So maybe you go once per week or once every 2 weeks. And also because I saw people moving away from London,
Yeah.
and also large organizations like BBC or Channel 4 or ITV, they are moving to other parts of the country, for creating, let's say, new possibilities, and also for people that wants to work in this kind of organization. And there is a decentralization that is happening at the moment, and economy wise, I think that will have a huge impact also, not only on tech but all the other industries that currently are impacted by not having people in the city center. Because in London, I think all the independent shops or independent restaurants, takeaways won't be there anymore, because in reality, if you don't have the same amount of people, what's the point?
Right.
I think there will be a change in the way how offices will be conceived. Maybe more hot desks, and a lot of meeting rooms, because obviously you will need them. But in reality, I think we understood that there isn't a strong need for tech, at least, to be in the same place. And therefore, I would say that many people will start to think, we work from home for a year and some
Right.
and few months, so we were able to do our job more or less well. And there are obviously some drawback, and we need to figure out how to fix them, like having whiteboarding sessions
Right.
virtually is painful.
Yes.
But for all the rest, there is a lot of work that can be smashed, and from the comfort of your home. Therefore, I think in many cases, people will work remotely, and I think large organizations already started to embrace this model, and they are seeing that so far it's working. Maybe not for everyone, but for quite a few people.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I've been remote now for 4+ years, and so this wasn't as huge a shift for me, other than I just didn't get on airplanes for the last year plus. But I know how much of a shift that was when I first made it, and you start to really enjoy that flexibility. One of the things that I've loved about my gig is, if my son had a day off of school and it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon and he wanted to go, kick the soccer ball around, I don't have any meetings. Yeah, let's go. And I think a lot of folks now have had a taste of that, and they don't have that lengthy commute into the city center. They're not buying lunch every day for 5, 10, $15 a pop. They're not having to worry about dry cleaning their clothes. There's a lot of benefits to this, and I think a lot of people are going to be hesitant to go back to 5 days a week doing the grind. I've never missed commuting. That was one of the things I loved about going remote, is not having to drive in heavy traffic in the morning and the afternoon. I never enjoyed that, and so I'm curious to see how many other people agree with me on the other side of this. But
Oh, totally. I was doing commuting 1 hour per day,
oof.
for going to work, 1 hour to go back. So I know exactly what you mean.
And it's tough. I mean, you get used to it, I guess, and you just kind of, well, that's normal. That's how things are. But then once you get those couple hours back, you're like, hey, I can do a lot with this. You know,
Yeah.
that's been one nice thing about not being on airplanes. I've got a lot more time to ride my bike, play golf, you know, hang out with my family. Turns out I have a lovely family, and that doesn't suck. You know, so I do think it's going to be really interesting to see how much of the travel that we've traditionally done is even still there in 2022. You know, I feel like the events are still going to happen. You know, maybe not quite at the frequency they did before.
Yeah.
You know, but maybe some of those, hey, you got to go visit this client, might be we're going to hop on a Zoom call. But yeah, who knows? Who knows? Um, Now, we were talking a bit in the pre-show about sort of how you got into this industry, and I think it's fair to say you took a non-traditional approach. Do you want to give us a little bit of your background on how you decided to play with computers for a living?
Yeah, absolutely. So till 16, I was at school, and then one night, and it was been a while, I was thinking about that, but I didn't feel myself very comfortable. So at 16, basically, I left school. That in Italy, where I'm coming from, was big deal because usually you don't have degree, you don't have, you are not graduated, you don't have anything, basically any qualification. And I started to work in a small factory in a warehouse. And one day, one of my colleague came to me, and we were talking about like 16, 17 years, no, more than that, 20 years ago almost. And time flies.
Yes, it does.
And came to me and said, listen, have you ever heard about HTML? And said, no, I have no clue. I mean, I started to have my first Pentium 3 in like few months before he told me about that. So I was moving from Amiga 1200 to this Pentium 3. Was already incredible. I was able to play some games. It was great.
Yep,
And then this guy came to me with this thing of HTML. I didn't know what it was at all. And then one day he came with this book. It was 500 pages on HTML 4.1. And I read it in, I think, in a couple of weeks. My mother
sure.
never seen me reading a book that big in such a short amount of time. And then yeah, then that was basically the beginning. I became passionate. At 17, I sold my first website
Oh, wow.
to a takeaway pizzeria. In Italy there are plenty, so it
Oh,
was
yeah,
easy. And that was the beginning. Basically, I became passionate about Flash, and I started to follow a community. And meanwhile, I was studying every night and working in this small factory in the morning and afternoons. I was trying to build my own website, learning Flash. And at some point, after 4 years, when I was 21, one company in my hometown, they saw my website. They said, "Listen, it's interesting what you're doing. We would like to hire you as a Flash developer." I said, "Okay, fine." And the first day, I learned how to do a for loop. That was, say, I was 21, it was May roughly, and I learned how to do a for loop and parse an XML file. That was my first day at work. And it was good. I mean, obviously, because I didn't have a technical background, I had to spend an awful amount of time on studying every night, every
sure.
weekend. Not much fun for my age, but at the end, it was helpful. In a few months, I became a certified Flash developer. That was good, and then I left that company, started my after 8 months. I started my career as a contractor, and there I learned the most. And I basically had a few communities that I was engaging with. I was sharing my learnings, and I was at the same time learning from others. And I took part of several, let's say, sessions that where I was just listening to people.
Yep.
There was this meetup around Italy. I was traveling around, trying to learn as much as I could, and then spend an awful amount of time creating pet projects just to learn better the technology. And that helped me a lot because then in few years I was able to have some friends where we were collaborating in larger projects. And then I had my first employee. and then I ended up to have like a few employees, like 7, 8 employees. It went pretty well for the first 8, 9 years in my career. I was able to work with large organizations like Disney or Adobe, IKEA, and many others, in very exciting projects. Vast majority of the time, I wasn't using Flash in traditional way, so I was doing a lot of mobile stuff, working on Nokia and Sony Ericsson with flashlights. So very challenging stuff. And then I work a lot on embedded system. I put like a Flash application inside the Ducati motorbike, or soda dispenser, for instance, stuff like that. And then I work a lot on touch screens and desktop applications, like retrieving data from ERPs or SAP, stuff like that. And I was just creating nice dashboard that people would be able to, let's say, engage in a decent way with data that were hidden behind these massive systems. And after that, after 10 years working in Italy in this way, I felt the need to, I was traveling a lot for learning internationally. So I was always having like 10,000 euros as a yearly budget for learning. And I was traveling to US often for conferences like the Adobe Max back in the days. And it's basically where I learned to speak English, mainly because at school I wasn't very great. I always thought I would never use English, so what's the point? So I learned basically in the street, did a few training, but nothing major. But in reality, I learned on at the conferencing, talking with people. First year, I caught basically 50% of what they were saying. The second year, 60%, then 80%. Then I was understanding fully what they were saying, so it was useful. And I was able to speak good enough. And then I started to do talks in English. That was another thing, was very useful, because you had to prepare more than what I was doing with my native language. Right. That was good. And then I moved to UK. I started as lead developer in a company in Bristol. And then after a few months, I was hired as a tech lead in London in a gambling company. And then I moved, I did quite a few interesting things. I changed quite a few companies deeply on the technology stack, because I'm a person that doesn't stop on the status quo. I always want to see the next level, right, and trying to challenge the status quo as much as I can. And then I jumped finally in this company called DAZN. And then after 6 years, I joined AWS. That was basically one of my dreams, because I wanted to see how the other eagles are flying. So sure. Obviously, working for a global and large organization as AWS was the dream when I started. I said to my girlfriend, at some point, in somehow, I will arrive in one of these large organizations. And I was able to do that at 38. So I feel extremely lucky and very proud of the journey I have done so far, because it was very bumpy and definitely not conventional. But I learned a lot, I shared a lot, and I'm doing still a lot for the community, because I have this debt that I have to pay, because I learn a lot. I get so much from them that I have to do something for at least sharing what the small that I know, and that's basically my mission.
Oh, that's fantastic. I think we were talking about this in the pre-show, but I think it's such a good reminder to folks that there isn't just one path to getting to whatever you view as your dream job in this industry. And this notion we have of the traditional computer science background hasn't been around that long, and it's not the only way to get there. You if you enjoy the tinkering and the creative process and the learning, you'll excel no matter how, no matter what your background is, whether it's computer science or chemistry or music or working in a factory. It doesn't really matter. You've either got that or you don't. But yeah, that's a fascinating background and definitely unique.
Yeah, to be honest with you, Nate, I think that school, I reason a lot about this stuff and how it's possible that I was able to arrive where I'm arrived. But I'm thinking that the main thing that school is giving you, apart from a path to follow, is time. So you
Yeah.
have basically the possibility to learn during I don't know, morning and afternoons, and instead I had to shrink my learnings in the evening and
Right.
weekends. But
Right.
the reality of the things is, I was studying, let's say, algorithm books or programming languages books and stuff like that, that are exactly the same or very similar to what you study at school. Obviously, I have some lack of knowledge in certain areas, and yeah, I know that, and it's normal, considering my background. But at the same time, I'm willing to feel it.
Right.
And I want to, and if I know that there is a specific thing that I need to feel, trust me, I would do the best for feeling it, because it's what I'm doing the last 18 years. So it's
Right.
not
Well,
not a big problem.
you've taught yourself how to learn in the way that works best for you. And I think that's really ultimately what we're trying to do with college and grad school, is teaching you how to learn, not specific topics, especially in this industry where things are rotating so quickly. Anything that we teach you today is probably outdated in 5 years, unless it's more of these evergreen communication kind of things, these foundational pieces. But the other notion that I try to disabuse people of is there is so much to know in this industry. You can't possibly know it all anyway, regardless of what your degree is in, or if you have a degree for that matter. And being humble enough to know that there's a huge ocean of stuff you don't know, to me, is the other real key to success in this industry, is not being so arrogant that you know all of it.
No, definitely.
Oh, cool. We have a commenter who is says hi from the south of Italy. So that's very cool.
Nice.
That's the thing I think is so neat about this industry of ours, is that we have people from everywhere. And it having done a lot of presentations in other countries, I always feel a little guilty when I realize I am presenting this in English because that's the only language I speak with enough ability to communicate effectively. And I've had so many audiences that are clearly listening to me in not their native tongue, and they're getting it, and they're getting the nuance. That's the part that kills me.
Yeah.
I understand the technical stuff because it's a smaller sphere, but when people get the jokes and they get that small, those kinds of cliche things that you have to have a deeper understanding, that's when I realize we struggle a little bit with that in our education system in the States. So I'm even more impressed that you can deliver presentations, outside of your native tongue, because I know how hard it is, to listen, outside. So, kudos to you. How did you get into the presenting side? That's a question I get a lot. How do I become a conference speaker? So what advice would you give to someone who's trying to do that as a hobby, or perhaps as a part of their career?
I would start saying there isn't any topic that really is better than another one, as long you are comfortable to and you are passionate about that. Usually, is a good mix for starting and preparing a talk. Secondly, there will be people that probably can go more in deep than you, or but anyway, there will be always an audience that is interested on what you're going to say, because in reality, the thing that I always say, we are working in a very empirical world where a trial allows you to show a specific result, but you can take a different path for achieving similar results. It's not scientific where, yeah, I put this and that and I will have that as a result. So, and I think that is quite key to understand. Therefore, for me, it's very interesting to understand the angle that the person, despite the experience and the knowledge they are taking for explaining specific topic. Secondly, I would say start with meetups. Meetups are the perfect platforms for doing your talk, learn from others. People are there for supporting you, are not there for judging you, and often people are afraid to be judged. But in reality, sometimes, I learned with experience that people maybe are very opinionated in the way how you expose a specific thing. But if you remove the emotional part and you take basically the technicality that they are sharing with you, you can learn stuff, and maybe you can make your presentation better. I know it's hard, because I was the first that when people were saying, "Oh no, this content is not great," I'm still having people that are saying that my content is not great.
Well, that's a
Um,
universal. It doesn't
yes,
matter. I've had to tell this to my son, that every audience you have there's always at least one person who thinks you're an idiot, and there's one person who thinks you're a genius, and you have to use Olympic scoring. You throw out the high and the low and take the rest, and
Yeah.
just accept that, and that's okay. There's all trolls gonna troll.
Yeah, exactly. I think that is very, very important. And then the other thing that I suggest is finding people, friends or colleagues, especially, that they want to listen to you before you do the talk, because they can provide a real valuable feedback in a safe environment.
Yep.
That for many people is very good. And also rehearse as much as you can, because often, after a few talks, you will be able to have the confidence going on the stage, also if you didn't rehearse much.
Yep.
But in reality, I noticed that the more you do the talk, the better you will pass through the stage. And I think that is very key. I remember recently, a couple of years ago, I did a keynote in a conference in Italy called Motion, and was my first keynote. I was quite nervous, and therefore I decided not to go with a technical topic. I went with an emotional one, where I
Yeah.
was basically, they asked me, "Can you summarize your experience in 30 minutes?" And I didn't know how to start with, and therefore I created these 4 stories. And I share basically like I was an external person that was describing the situation. In reality, it was me, but I was introducing the person, and I was the guest of this specific story. And it went extremely well. I had
Yeah.
like 300-400 people there. I was listening, and they were quite impressed about the things. Few people that they knew me deeply, they knew that I was talking about myself, but all the others, it was like a nice story, and they really loved that, because it was basically 4 snapshot of my life, describing, finding, let's say, some good result that I was able to achieve, and also some takeaways
Sure.
for the people, because they can apply the day after, when they go back to when they went back to work.
Yeah.
So I think it was interesting. I did just once, but the preparation for that 30 minutes was, I don't know, 8-9 hours of
Oh,
work.
right. Right. Yeah, I think that's one thing a lot of people don't really appreciate about presenting. It takes a lot of time and effort to make it look that effortless.
Yes.
And for a 30-minute talk, it's not a half hour of work to prep for it. It's an order of magnitude more to get to that level. And frankly, I find the shorter the talk, the more effort I have to put in, because you have to be succinct. I did a keynote a couple times that was, I want to say, 10 or 12 minutes, 15 minutes, like right in that zone. Have not practiced to talk more than that one, because you need to get the timing right, and that takes rep after rep, going, okay, I need to tighten this up, or I need to, polish this off. And that's a lot harder, at least for me, than, okay, you got all day. Like, oh, I got all day. I can jazz hands if I need to, but well, you give me 12 minutes, and now I really gotta work. But yeah, that's great advice, I think, to start with the meetups, the user groups. It's a good way to kind of get your feet wet, get comfortable, good way to
Yeah.
give back. The other thing that I always like to remind people of is those quote unquote introductory 101 talks are really popular for a reason, because there's a lot of people who are just learning this thing, and this idea that everybody already knows this, it doesn't really apply. And every year we're churning out thousands and thousands of new people who are just getting started on this, and being able to see that what is XYZ turns out to be a really useful experience. So don't ever look down your nose at doing an intro talk, for sure. Now, I usually talk about food because it's lunchtime-ish for me. And since you're from Italy, which has some of the best food on the planet, I'm curious, how did you like that transition to a country whose cuisine maybe is not quite up to the standards of your homeland?
Yeah, I it was the first few weeks. It was a bit tough, to be honest with you, because obviously not knowing which supermarket you should go,
Right.
or what this specific thing would taste like and stuff like that. It was challenging, but I have to say, UK became way better in the last 5-6 years, and they started to import a lot from other countries. And the cuisine, I think the level of cuisine is way better than 8 years ago, definitely. And talking with the other Londoners, they are telling me that it is definitely better than 20 years ago.
Yes.
So I'm in a situation that currently I don't have any problem, honestly, to eat decent Italian food in London, because so many Italians moved here and they are importing from Italy. Sometimes, it's challenging to find certain kind of food, but so far I would say I enjoyed a lot opening my mind to Chinese or Lebanese food or Japanese food that in my hometown in Italy is pretty small.
Sure.
I don't have the possibility to eat proper Indian food, for instance, that I became quite mad, to be honest. Is absolutely great.
Yes. Yes, it is.
um yeah, so I basically open up and I started to replicate certain dishes from other countries in my house, and it's going pretty well, to be honest.
Is there a favorite sort of comfort food or like a special meal that you like to make? Anything that just always reminds you of home?
At the moment, I think the best thing the thing that I grew up with a lot of risottos.
Oh,
I'm doing many of them in my usually. It's a fact tonight I'm going to prepare the risotto with asparagus. That is basically because it's season for asparagus, so that's the
yeah.
right time to do that. But in general, yeah, risotto in any kind of shape or form, yes, a lot.
Nice.
That's definitely something that I really like to do. And then I would say also the Parmigiana is another thing that resign very well with
Oh,
me.
I haven't been to Italy as much as I would like to be, but every time I've gone there, oh, the food, I miss that. I mean, you can get good food pretty much anywhere now, but
Yeah.
there's very clear that some cultures it's just embedded in the DNA. And
Yes.
yeah, I reach for the Italian side of the aisle a lot in my own sort of, or when my wife's asking for meal ideas, both the whole family tends towards that in a big way. But oh, man, I'm getting hungry now. So now that restaurants are opening back up, is there any place you're really excited to get back to that you've missed over the last period of time?
One in particular, unfortunately, is closed, definitely,
Mm,
unfortunately, and therefore I won't be able to go. It was a very good Italian that was mixing the traditional cuisine with the nouvelle cuisine, if you want. Was pretty interesting what he was doing. But now I would say some seafood restaurants
okay.
definitely is something that I'm missing, because despite here in London you can find a lot of seafood, it's not the same variety that I was used
Oh,
to
sure.
from yeah, exactly, so from Italy, because I was close to the Adriatic Sea, and therefore the seafood there was really really good, close to Venice basically.
Mm,
And I was very lucky to grew there. But now I have obviously you can find stuff, but it's not, let's say, I cannot cook, let's say, the same way. So a
right.
nice seafood restaurant definitely is something that I'm looking for.
Nice. Yeah, see, I'm in the Midwest, which means I'm landlocked. And while Minnesota has ample lakes, fresh seafood was not necessarily something you were going to find on a regular basis when I was growing up. So I never quite got the seafood bug, at least not the way that maybe I would have had I grown up near the ocean. But such is life. Such is life. But
Yeah.
yeah, the other thing that I miss about Italy is the coffee.
Mm.
I don't know what it is about getting an espresso in Italy, but it's different. And I've long since learned that when you're in another country, you look for the coffee shop that's either run by Australians or Italians, because the Australians learned it from the Italians.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I agree with you. Especially if you try the coffee in the espresso in Naples. I
Ooh.
don't know why, but it's completely different from the rest of Italy. And sometimes they say it's the water, and but in reality they do in a way that for me was phenomenal. I mean, when I went to Naples several years ago, I said that it's like I never drink coffee since now. it was insane. But yeah, I agree with you. Coffee is definitely a big problem, especially in the offices where I went so far. Finally, I have to say, in the last two, at least I found an espresso that is decent enough. But still, coffee it can be a problem. In London, I have to say, in the last 3-4 years, they started to raise a lot of these independent coffee shop,
Yes.
and they are overall pretty good. I mean, it's not the same that in Italy, but the taste is really good.
Yeah, no, there's a few spots that I can think of off the top of my head in and around the London area that I would frequent when I was over there for good coffee, and a couple spots also had really good food too to go along with it. But yeah, I miss that. I'm an espresso fan. I've become a bit of an espresso snob, and my wonderful espresso machine gave me the service me message yesterday. So I'm kind of at that crossroads of, is it time to get a new espresso machine? Because I don't think I can be without my machine for the 2 weeks or whatever it takes to get it fixed. And I don't even know I don't think anything's wrong with it. I just think every 6,000 cycles it needs to go back to the factory for a cleaning job or something, and that's probably fine. But that's a couple weeks. I don't want to be running out to the coffee shop for 2 weeks if I can avoid it. So I guess we'll see what my CFO, who's normally over my shoulder here, what she decides is the right way to solve this problem. But yeah, I think once you've had really good coffee, I mean, frankly, really any food item that you once you've kind of had it in that platonic ideal form, really hard to go back to what you used to think was good.
I agree.
my I started baking bread over kind of the winter season here since I couldn't get outside as much in Minnesota. And one of the things I attempted was making pizza at home. And I didn't expect it to turn out quite as well as it did, but now we're at the point where that's the pizza that my kid wants all the time. And so now I've had to start getting in that habit. But it is one of those things, like once you've had that fresh crust and you get that nice crispy bottom with your baking steel, and yeah, it's pretty hard to order takeout at that point.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I started to do to sharp the saw on my barbecue skills. So I started to do American short ribs,
Yes.
and that was phenomenal. The first time when I was able to get out the bone from the meat without, let's
Just
say,
slides
using the
off.
knife or anything. It
Yeah.
was just literally getting them out.
Yep.
Was
Yep.
that sensation was incredible.
Well, my friend Paul, he convinced me to upgrade my home grill to something that's quite a bit better than what I had, and I'm anxiously awaiting my first attempt at actually a long, slow cook on something. I don't know what the first thing will be, but I've grilled a couple times now with it, and yeah, it's definitely been a step up from what I had been using, which was fine, but it's definitely nice to have a little better equipment for sure, and
Yeah.
given the amount of time we're home now, seems like it's worth doing. But is there any place you're excited to get back to once we're free to move about the globe?
Definitely Italy, because it's a year and a half now that I'm not going back. But apart from that, I would say I'm a big fan of US, and I spend a lot of time in West Coast and East Coast in the past few years. So I would like to go back for conferences and meeting few friends there. Yeah, that would be great. Maybe at the end of the year towards reinvent time, it would be great going back to Vegas. But let's see. I mean, at the moment, I'm more living day to day, so already
Yeah.
going back to the office was a big win. Last week I went for the first time in my new office in AWS, meeting my team. And it was a great feeling, to be honest with you. A bit awkward at the beginning,
Oh, I
but
bet.
still a great feeling.
Well, we were talking about this a little bit at in the pre-show. I think it's going to be a weird transition. I was thinking about this the other day. Like, I haven't shaken anyone's hand in more than a year. I don't. Are we going back to that? Or are we just going to like elbow bump? Or are we just going to nod? I mean, I'm hoping the hygiene stuff sticks around because I've been through enough airports to know how many people don't wash their hands after going to the restroom, and I hope that some of that sticks, but yeah, it's going to be a little weird. I think especially when you talk about an event the size of reInvent, where I
Yeah.
mean, my gosh, that's a lot of bodies. I think there's going to be a little bit of panic there. Not maybe not panic, but just a little bit of angst about being around that large a body. And yeah, it doesn't seem like there's much of an appetite in the US at least to have any kind of vaccine passport like thing where you can prove that you were vaccinated. I would certainly feel a lot more comfortable if I was around people that I knew were vaccinated, but I'm guessing that's not going to stick in any way that's meaningful. But I don't know. I mean, a lot can change in 3 weeks, let alone 6 months. So I'm curious to see what
Yeah,
it looks like.
I agree with you. I'm curious to see how the things are going to change because currently, last week also in the office where there were like 8 people in a floor of probably hundreds,
Right.
and that tells you already the story because it's completely different. Obviously, if it was very quiet, you can do your work pretty well. But I think also the way how an office or a conference would has to be rethought to a certain extent
Yeah.
because I'm struggle to see the same amount of people go to the office every day, and probably you can handle the spaces in different way because I think the reality we understood that probably is better doing the day-to-day job from wherever you want, and then catching up with your peers when it's really needed,
Hmm.
maybe for I don't know whiteboard exercises or when you meet with a customer, stuff like that. But in reality, if you think about that, it's you can compress those activities in a couple of days per week, and the
Right.
rest could be handled by the comfort of your own home or wherever you want.
Right. Well, and I think with some people having relocated during the pandemic, either lower cost places or be closer to family or whatever it happens to be, I think that's going to have an interesting effect here too. And, I suspect the personal connection is still really important. That's the thing I missed. I mean, I make no bones about the fact part of the reason I do this stream is to have a chance to catch up with my friends and call it work. And, so that still is necessary. And so I could still see something where we have like a team offsite once or twice a year and bring people to one central location and hang out and share some meals and maybe do some of that more in-person stuff, but also just for the bonding side of it. I have a teammate that I've never met in person. I've seen her on Zoom countless times. I interviewed her on Zoom. I know her, but I never met her. I couldn't tell you if she's tall or short or anything I can't see on a Zoom window. I don't know. I don't know. It's kind of strange, and I look forward to someday meeting her in some physical place and sharing a cup of coffee or having a meal or whatever. And so I do think that's missing, and those team kind of bonding things are one of the things that I really miss from the before times. And hopeful that we have something coming up here in the next 6 months where we can get at least a taste of that. But I don't know. Well,
Yeah, we will see it.
yeah, and I hope that we're able to get on airplanes, and I hope that at some point, we can get you to the Midwest, and I'll throw something on the grill for you. And worst case, hopefully I get to come to the UK sometime here in the next 6 months, and we can get together, and you can share some of your good restaurant spots for me
Yeah,
because I'm always hunting for good places to eat. But
yeah, there are quite a lot of nice places in London, as you know. So
oh yes.
definitely we can share our list.
Yeah, no, it'd be interesting to see what kind of where they overlap because I got to imagine there's at least a few spots, but who knows?
You can be surprised.
Yes, yes, exactly. Well, this is one of those things that Neil really kind of helped me understand that one of the cool things about traveling is you get to experience things that are only in that place. And
Yeah.
one of those things that you don't export well out of a city are its restaurants. And that to me is part of what I miss about being homebound is not getting a chance to either explore and find new places or go back to the places that for me are so intricately tied to that place. I mean, I make no bones about it that my favorite restaurant exists in London, and I miss it, and I hope to get back there soon. For some definition of soon, but who knows what that means.
Yeah, exactly.
So how have you been handling the pandemic? Is there anything you've been doing to help you kind of get through it, tolerate it? I think we're all kind of dealing with this in different ways, and I'm curious how it's been for you. And are you streaming stuff? Are you reading stuff? All of the above? What are you doing to keep your sanity?
Yeah, so one thing that I definitely missed during pandemic was reading books, because usually in my commute time I have 1 hour
Oh,
to go,
sure.
1 hour to go back. So that hour for me was my reading hours, and I could smash a book of 200-300 pages easily in a month.
Sure.
And now obviously I couldn't anymore. But at the same time, the first few weeks I was okay staying at home for the whole week and going out during the weekend. But yeah, after a while, I couldn't cope up anymore. So I started to go out every morning from 7:45 to 9 almost. And I just do a walk around here where I live, listening to a podcast.
Hmm.
And I started to consume basically every day one podcast. That it sounds a lot, but in reality is so is incredible, the honestly what you can find out there.
Yeah.
And there are plenty of great resources. What I learned the most is that podcasts, basically vast majority of the time, they are not teaching you a specific I don't know architecture or implementation or whatever it is, but they are many people are sharing their experience in the trenches.
Right.
And that is extremely valuable, because often, you maybe know the technology but you don't know where to apply, and you can see someone that have done that. And it's absolutely incredible what you can learn from people out there, from different background and different experiences. So I basically bombarding my team every day with my podcast and the podcast that I'm listening, and I say, listen, you should really listen to this episode. It's pretty cool. It's talking about this and that, and could be helpful for us. And they like it a lot. And I started to have few people that are replying back, say, oh yeah, I went out this morning and I listened to this other podcast. So there is this cross contamination
Oh,
that
sure.
is working pretty well.
Yeah, it's a good reminder. It is just to kind of have some kind of a habit of being
Yeah.
able to do that. And one of the things that has been hard, at least for some people, I think, during this pandemic, is making sure you take some time to have a little bit of that separation, to get out and take a walk, be out in nature, listen to a podcast, read a book. Because it can be really easy to just sort of get slurped into the next Zoom call, and it's harder to have that separation. And that was one of the things I struggled with when I first went remote is, how do you keep that boundary between work time versus not work time? And one of the things I do, and this still, my family gives me grief about it, but I have what my family refers to as work from home pajamas. So I've got a pair of shorts and a t-shirt, and then I have a different set of short t-shirt that I wear when work is done, because that's lounge wear versus work wear.
Yeah.
And I know it's trivial and it's really not any different, but it's a signal to my brain that no, work is over now. It's family time. It's non-work time. And I think having those kind of rituals helps. I mean, that's kind of what a commute is that we don't give it credit for. It's that preparing for the day, it's that decompressing from the day and signaling to yourself that, yep, let's it's time to go, or it's time to be ready to be home. And so it's good to have those rituals, I think, to help us. Is
Yeah,
there
totally.
is there any thinking of the UK, that one of the shows that has resonated so much to me that my family and I, we rewatched it last weekend, was Ted Lasso. And so I don't know if there's any shows or anything like that that you would recommend, or I mean, it seems like some people have found the end of Netflix. Apparently there is, infinity isn't really a thing when it comes to that, but it sure feels that way. Is there anything in that space that you resonate with?
I don't watch much TVs, usually during the weekend a bit, but usually my evenings are for studying and researching. So, as I said before, because of my
You
background, I
established
still
that
feel
habit
that
when you were a teenager, and you still do it.
exactly. It's yeah, I don't watch my now. I have like the Saturday evening and the Sunday evening that I spend a bit of time watching something with my girlfriend. But in reality, the other evenings I don't have much time. So currently Netflix has, yeah, definitely is a good way, but I don't have like a favorite thing to watch. Is more random action movies or comedy stuff like that. But
Sure.
it depends night by night. I don't have like something specific to suggest, to be honest.
Well, you've also got a youngling to deal with, and I remember back to those eras. It's a little harder when you've got kids. They
Yeah.
they take up some time. But then
Yeah,
they get
yeah.
older and they take up time in different ways. My son had a soccer tournament this weekend, and so that was our weekend was
Yeah.
driving to and from the massive soccer complex and going through that, and then the ups and downs of, yay, we won two, oh, we lost one, and yeah, it's interesting, but it's fun. I mean, although my son is a goalie or keeper, and it's a very stressful thing to be the parent of a keeper because any mistake he makes is glaringly obvious to anybody who just happens to be walking by the field. You don't have to understand the game. You don't have to be watching the game, but you can see if he made a mistake, even if it wasn't necessarily his mistake. And it's hard as a parent to know that all that pressure is centered on my kid and I can't do anything to help him. But it's what he wants to be. So,
Yeah.
we deal with it. But
Yeah, to be honest, I played football, soccer for 15 years in Italy, and I know I wasn't a goalkeeper; I was midfield. But unfortunately, I think it's very healthy, to be honest, for everyone, also for your son, also for the keeper, mainly because in the long run, you learn how to play with his team, how to bond with teammates.
right.
And I see many of the learnings that I had on the pitch that are applicable on my day-to-day job. For instance, one thing that we were used to do is after at least once per week, we were used to go to a pizzeria and have a pizza all together.
Yeah.
And I'm still doing that with my teammates.
Oh,
So
sure.
previously, every 2 weeks, and in UK is not so normal. So we were used to go out for lunch, and we were talking about work, nothing too crazy. But in reality, having this change and being in
Yeah,
front of a meal, it creates a bound that you
it
don't
does.
have usually.
Yeah. Well, you start to talk about things that aren't strictly work related and you start to see those connections. And I do think that's been one of the advantages to this work from home world that many of us inhabit. We're seeing another side of our colleagues. We're seeing their family, we're seeing their pets, we're seeing more into their lives. And I think that gives us this more three-dimensional view of each other. We start to see each other as human beings and we start to go, oh, your son plays football, so is my son. And we can start to have that conversation. And now it isn't just the person I bump into in the hallway, it's the person who has a kid my son's age and has similar interests. And now we have that tighter connection. And I think that that's very, very good, in the long run. But it's funny you mentioned football versus soccer. Yesterday, my son wanted to do some practice after we played golf. So we went up to the local pitch and a couple of other kids his age happened to be there. In fact, one of them was on one of his soccer teams a couple years ago, and so we got to chatting. And one of the kids, amazingly enough, was from Denmark. This friend of my son's had lived in Spain for a couple of years, and had this kid had also lived in Spain for a few years, so they knew each other from that. I mean, just this random connection. And we all agreed that calling it soccer doesn't make any sense since it's the sport you only use your feet, and then American football where you basically almost never kick the ball. This seems like kind of a weird name, but that ship has sailed in the U.S. I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just that one. There are other.
Well,
But
we touched briefly about Australia. There's at least two or three different kinds of football in Australia that I don't really understand. I've tried to get my head wrapped around it, and I did have somebody explain the rules to me on at least one of their variants. I don't get it. But there are some sports that I'm convinced you have to sort of grow up with. Cricket is that for me. I've tried to understand cricket 3 or 4 times. It ain't happening. I just can't get my head wrapped around it. But such is life. Well, let me throw a few lightning round questions at you. See what kind of trouble that gets us into here. I think I know the answer to this one, but coffee, espresso, or tea?
oh, espresso.
Well played. Well played. Agree completely. How about pie versus cake?
I would say cake.
Okay. Okay. I had this debate with Dahlia from JetBrains the other day about this, and her whole thing was, well, it's the kind of pie, and I threw one out at her, and she says, no, 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 Nate, that's wrong. It has to be one of these. I'm like, well, okay, all right, we can agree to disagree on that one. But how about oceans or mountains?
Mountains, I would say. Not big fan I like the seaside for the food,
Yes.
but, but not spending time there. Definitely, I love spending time in the mountains. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with that one. My son would like to trade some of our lakes to Colorado for one of their teeners or a couple of their teeners, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah.
How about food trucks versus Michelin stars? Where are we going to eat tonight?
Food trucks.
I think,
Sorry.
well, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Neil has taught me to enjoy fine dining, and I love knocking down some stars when I have the chance. But you can only eat that level of food so often before your bank account
Yeah.
cries out for mercy. And as much as I really miss that, by the same token, there's something about getting, a taco from a food truck
Yeah.
that resonates well. No,
Yeah,
you
but
you
also I think the social aspect, because in reality, when you go to the food truck, it's unlikely that you are alone. Maybe you are with your friends,
that's a
maybe
good point.
after a match of your favorite team or wherever
Yep.
it is.
Yep.
And that aspect, I think everyone bounds immediately because you are there. It's a social experience. It's not only the food experience.
Right. Right. No, that's a great point that it's more about the people. And, I very much want to go back to my favorite restaurant, but I want my whole team to come with me because it's a lot more fun when you're there with your friends as opposed to just being there by yourself. Not that I'm against that. I have eaten there by myself a couple times
Yeah.
and will do so again immediately, but I really would rather have my family or my friends with me because it's a richer experience. It's more fun to share. But now you talked about reading a lot. Are you ebook or paper or both? What's your preference?
Uh, Usually, the rule of thumb is important books, paper books.
Okay.
Otherwise, if it's something the topic is interesting but not, let's say, that essential, I will go with ebooks.
Okay. I like the fact that I can have a whole bunch of ebooks on my device and it's with me. And if I've got 5 minutes, I can hop into that book.
Yeah.
But it is harder to use it as a reference, even though, although it is funny how my brain has gotten so used to being able to do a highlight that's perfectly square that I was actually reading Neil and Mark's book and using a real highlighter and I was getting mad at myself that my highlights were all squiggly and I'm like, oh, wait, I want to, I can't erase it because
Exactly.
yeah, it's in a physical book. It's all trade-offs. But how about Game of Thrones versus Lord of the Rings?
Lord of the Rings.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
We were watching, I guess that's what, Winter Soldier, and they make a comment in there about Lord of the Rings, and the Bucky character says, "Well, yeah, I read that when it came out in 1937." And so that's been my son's favorite line. So, how about DC versus Marvel? Where do you stand on the comic book wars?
Oh God, it should be a question for my brother. Yeah, no, I read comics. Probably will go with Marvel because I'm a big fan of Wolverine.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good character. This has come up a lot in some of these conversations, but it's kind of amazing to me how rich that Marvel universe is, and I'm still not sure why DC hasn't been able to match that. The DC movies just don't seem to be up to that same level for whatever reason, and I don't completely understand what it is. But such is life. How about night owl or morning lark? Would you rather be up late or up early?
Oh, so if you asked me 10 years ago, I prefer up late. Now I
Mm-hmm.
would say I'm a morningish person,
Sure.
mainly because probably with 2 years old, that he didn't allow me to sleep much in
Yep.
the first 2 years
Yep.
of her life. And the fact that I saw that I'm my brain function way better in early morning, I would say morning.
Yeah, it's interesting how that shifts throughout your life, and
Yeah.
without a doubt, kids will adjust that. When my son was younger, he was awake at 6 in the morning, 5:30 in the morning, and then basically one of the adults has to get up at that point. So you kind of get into that habit of getting up early. Now he's a teenager, and cattle prod will work to get him out of bed, but he's completely flipped his schedule. He'll stay up much later and will get up much later. And we have these debates about how best to wake him up. The way that I've been using, he doesn't enjoy because it's a song that he doesn't like to hear. But mom apparently has a better way of doing it. I don't know. He wouldn't go into details, but I was told in no uncertain terms I'm not allowed to wake him up. So All right. All right. So you could just set an alarm and he said, "Rah, rah," but how about cats versus dogs? And I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this based on our earlier
Yeah,
conversation.
dogs. I have two Jack Russells, so
Oh, that's awesome. I love dogs. You know, we have cats just because they're lower maintenance, you know, but I do certainly have had plenty of dogs in my lifetime, and there is something about a dog. There's no getting around it. But I do like the fact that I can leave the cats for the weekend and there's no harm,
yeah.
no foul as long as there's enough food out. But what about tabs versus spaces? Do you ever get into that borderline
Uh,
religious debate?
no, I'm let's say I'm not that dogmatic, but definitely I'm a type person.
See, I think that's one of those things as an architect you learn that dogmatism is not good. You know, that you need to be pragmatic. You know, and this is one of those things I've talked about a lot in various presentations. You know, as an architect, you realize pretty quickly that that's probably not a hill I want to die on, and you have to defer some of that to your team and just let them have that win, so to speak, and live to fight the more important battles. But that takes some time to get used to. There's no getting around
Oh
it.
yeah, definitely.
How was your adjustment to being an architect? You know, I try to keep this more about personal stuff, but this is something that I'm really curious about to sort of get your perspective on what was that transition like for you?
I have to say it was okay on in the terms that I was also before becoming officially an architect, let's say leading from the front and the fore, I was very hands-on. And I think that the part that I struggled the most was how people were seeing me.
Mm,
Because when you had the title, something changed in
yeah,
people's mind. And that's a shame, in my opinion, because in reality, I'm the same person that I was before, because I'm
right.
still. For instance, I remember when I was VP of architecture, once I did like a pair programming session with one engineer, and he looked at me and he said, "Listen, you are the VP of architecture." I said, "And then what? I mean, what does it mean that I'm not capable to code anymore?"
Right, right,
um, so the thing for me is I liked, obviously I would like to be more involved. I have to say now in AWS I have more time to write code than before, but I think the main thing is remaining in the space. I truly believe architects, hands-on architects are the ones that are working better with the teams, because they are still actual and still understanding what's going on. If you are completely abstract, you struggle, and there's so many architects honestly that struggles to design things, because in reality, it, obviously you cannot know everything, but you have
right,
to know a bit.
right.
And if you don't understand the problem, or you rely to others, but then what's the point? So I think you really need to have some traction in the coding and understanding what you're doing. And to be honest, you don't need. There are people who are saying, "Oh, you should take some stories inside the sprint." But often I've seen architects that are maybe across, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 domains, and you don't have a team that you can work for it. There are very few companies that can handle that.
Right.
So my suggestion usually is doing POCs,
Yeah,
and creating POCs that your spare time or during working hours. But in reality, that helps you a lot, because you basically, at least for me, clicks in my mind how to plug a specific part of an architecture with another part, and that works extremely well with me. And also doing presentations, because
mm,
I think as architects you are in the perfect position, because you see what challenges your company is facing, what and people are struggling with, and you can link basically the business outcome with the technicality, and you can also be the best person for simplifying the learnings. Because often, when you are writing code, you have something that is working, but in reality it's not just that. You need to extract the nature of what you have done, simplifying for others, and trying to make, if you want, a mental model behind a specific thing. And that basically exercise is creating a mechanism in your brain, because you are simplifying to explain to someone else.
right.
You are mastering that specific topic very well.
Oh, that's brilliant. You know, you as architects, we have the space, I think, to
Yeah.
do that more than when your heads down, grab the next card, solve this bug, kind of a domain. And I 100% agree with you. The best way to learn something is to teach it to somebody else, because as you work through it and as you try to craft that message, you start to find those edges, and it at least for me is how my brain works. Learn how to teach it, and then you're going to learn it. That's a lot more effective than anything else.
Yes.
But wow, that I think is a fantastic place for us to end. I know I went a little long, and I don't want to keep you get between you and your risotto. And
No
I'm very
worries.
excited by this recipe. But I want to thank you for hanging out with me, my friend. This was great. I'm glad we could catch up, and I'm guardedly optimistic we're going to get a chance to get some espresso in person soon for some
Yeah.
value of soon.
No, thank you very much for having me. It was a real pleasure taking part of your show.
Awesome. Well, thank you. We'll be back next week with one of my colleagues from Canada. So he's I think I might technically be north of him. That's one of the beauties of being on this globe. Even though Minnesota is below Canada, I think technically Toronto is south of me, but I'm not 100% sure on that. I don't understand how lines of sight and all that work. But I got my buddy Adib will be here next week. But I just want to say once again, thank you, Luca. I appreciate your time, and I hope you enjoy your risotto.
Yeah, thanks. I will.
Cheers.
Have a nice evening.